This is a game that is very deep in my heart. I distinctly remember going to a store with my dad and I had to choose between Valkyrie Profile 2 and Mortal Kombat on the PS2. Very tough choice considering I was an avid fan of fighting games, but the artwork on the box art of Valkyrie Profile 2 just won me over. I legitimately thought Silmeria and Alicia were a couple. If you want simple answers to questions such as, is this game worth your time, is this game better than the previous Valkyrie Profile game, is the game unavailable for purchase, yes to all of them, and I'll be going into detail as to why, among other things. Just to lay the foundation before going into the details of the game, Valkyrie Profile 2 was my first foray into the series, followed by Valkyrie Profile Lenneth and Covenant of the Plume. Tri-Ace developed the game. They are also responsible for the other two games in the series, and they are all very creative and unique in their own right. The development process was challenging and applied pressure on the team to create something that wouldn't disappoint fans of the previous entry, Valkyrie Profile. The script wasn't even finished when the development for the sequel started. This is quite daring because this can potentially sink a game because it generally shows a lack of planning, and it's compounded by the fact that the story was revised more than once. The story had a few oddities, but it came out fantastic in the end. The development team was very aware of the love that fans had for the previous entry, so they made it a high priority to avoid inconsistencies. They also integrated various references and hints to the last game, and it definitely shows if you have a keen eye and played the first game. The team wanted to make a game that would deepen the appreciation of long-time fans of the series but also cater to a fresh new fan base. They were particularly worried that the story might have been too confusing or complicated to get into, so they tried to strike a perfect balance. The reason for the departure of the omnibus structure that was beloved by the fans previously, it had a traditional orthodox story structure, which is both its greatest asset and pitfall. Generally, the fans love the unique structure in comparison to the second entry but do agree that the main story isn't as fleshed out. This entry is the complete opposite in this regard. The main story comes first and most of the Einherjar comes second. From the gameplay development side, it was comprised of a lot of trial and error. Surprisingly, they suggest that the platforming elements involving the crystallization of enemies were possibly the most challenging part of the development, and they shifted through a lot of ideas that were left on the cutting room floor. Such as the environments having multiple floors on top of each other and using magic abilities that have such a large range that they can damage the enemies on the second floor. There were more crazy ideas at the planning stages of the game. Unfortunately, while these ideas may have been awesome in its conceptual stages, the burden gets placed on the programmers and such may have been discarded because of the large amounts of effort/work that is needed to implement these features. This may shock some fans, but the Einherjar wasn't initially supposed to be involved at all in Valkyrie Profile 2. They wanted the focus to be on the main story, but since they realized that a lot of party members will be leaving the party throughout the story, they wanted to compensate for this. They are treated a lot like strategic resources. The graphics are one of the best the PS2 has been graced with. This title has been lauded as one of the best looking PS2 games, and to this day, it's one of the most demanding software to ever be emulated on PCSX2. This is no small part due to the development of the physics in-game. It was painstakingly optimized and tweaked for a long time. The other highlight of the graphics is its unnatural and beautiful lighting. They created unorthodox light sources to light up the environments to create a dark and atmospheric mood. I hope Tri-Ace revisits this specific entry because I genuinely feel this was the best Valkyrie Profile game in the series. There are a lot of ways to expand the story and gameplay in various ways that I'll go through later in the video. Also, here's a spoiler warning for potential spoilers being mentioned. The themes that the series tries to convey are authoritarianism, rebellion, life and death, struggles, inhumanity, and the dark side of religious tyranny. It's no different here. The story is about a princess from Daipan that carries another person's soul inside her, specifically a Valkyrie's soul after a soul transfer process failed. The princess, Alicia, had Silmeria with her since childhood, and boy does it get spicy. Silmeria told Alicia a lot of things that Alicia isn't supposed to know, and her father took notice, so what did he do about it? He locked her away in a castle near Krell Montferrine, Rapunzel style. I get his intentions are good and all, but damn, she's completely secluded from the outside world, and that's on top of being declared dead by her father. After a couple of years, Hraist descends upon the castle that holds Alicia to kill her, and Silmeria encourages Alicia to escape. The reason that is given for Hraist's intentions for wanting to kill Alicia can be explained by the cycle of rebirth that the Valkyries endure. Only one Valkyrie can exist at a time. And also Odin is a dick and wants Silmeria's Einherjar to return to Valhalla. Eventually, Alicia and Silmeria escape from a heated confrontation with Hraist. That's how the game starts. Throughout multiple chapters, you recruit story characters and Einherjar along the way with the main goal of getting a sacred treasure, the Dragon Orb. The party needs it to even have a chance to fight against Odin and the forces of Valhalla, but Odin has his own plans to derail Alicia and Silmeria's plans. What if I told you that some of the party members Alicia recruited are a spy? Yeah, I know, it's not an original strategy, but Alicia has the weakness of being too open and trusting towards people, and it pays off for Odin.
Dear dumb ass, every thought in your mind is dumb. Every word you speak is dumb. I pray that the world is against you. You may start to notice people spending a lot of energy trying to tear you down. Take it personally. You are not brilliant. You are not strong. You are alone. And remember, whatever you do, kill yourself.
And Alicia too? I'll explain. Alicia and Hraist's relationship begins to develop. The latter begins to understand more about humans, and she is shown to not just be a two-dimensional villain like her previous depiction in Valkyrie Profile 1. The other characters also have growth throughout the story. This is one major characteristic that Valkyrie Profile 2 has over its predecessor: active steady character development. I was so intrigued and immersed by Leon/Hraist's and Alicia's interactions with each other, it made me think that they were like actual sisters and they cared for one another. I'll go into depth about Hraist in a separate video. For the main protagonist, Alicia, she goes through a lot of turmoil. From losing almost everybody, contemplating suicide, and losing her home due to the destruction caused by the gods of Valhalla, you do feel sorry for her.
Yeah, my great-grandfather used to read this to me when I was a little child on Christmas Eve. Now he's dead.
She does grow throughout the story, in character and in gameplay, so it is noticeable if you pay attention.
The soul is reborn and summoned countless times. And beyond myriad rebirths, the demise of the soul awaits. Such is the cycle of causality.
Thank you, Alicia. To watch you become the brave figure you are now, at this moment, is the very reason I was reborn into you. I can feel it.
Unfortunately, this is only secluded to the main cast. All the Einherjar you collect through exploration do not get involved in the story. They are in their bubble at the back seat in this entry. Some do interact with other Einherjar in certain party combinations, and they do have background descriptions attached to them if you are interested in their lore. I would put this as a detriment to the game, but the main cast more than makes up for the lack of presence from the Einherjar in this game. The Einherjar's backstories are interesting too. If Valkyrie Profile 2 had a bigger budget, I think they could have elaborated on the stories to make them more impactful rather than just a description box.
Is that you? How dare you show your face before me?
I think, Lady Rochelle, that there has been some misunderstanding. Do you have proof I was involved in that incident?
What the fuck is wrong with your ashy ass?
There are a lot of surprises in the story, some iffy.
That which does not grow falls into decay. The hand worthy of wielding this divine lance is mine!
Yeah, all right. Give me a minute.
Some not surprising, and others snatched my wig off so fast that my asshole twitched. Near the end of the game, you'll be visited by yours truly and finally be able to play as Silmeria, but they'll take that away in a cutscene soon after. The ending was pretty good. They went all Super Saiyan at the last moment and slapped the boss harder than YouTube slapping the Act Man with a demonetization strike. I'm a big Act Man fan, FYI. It was brilliant and emotional in peak JRPG fashion. They do intentionally leave the ending ambiguous and vague. They left it up to interpretation to make it more mysterious. It does have its critics, myself included. The game's story feels too short and rushed, and the appearance of Lenneth is poorly handled. While I am happy that she is in the game, they could have made her introduction a lot smoother by having a playable section of her own. One of the camp scenes with Alicia's party where they are sleeping could have transitioned to Lenneth's world and find out why her world is experiencing changes. She could have had a level with the first entry's gameplay mechanics, such as creating photon platforms without needing an enemy, for example. I can already imagine the 3D recreation of her intros from the first game, to distinguish herself from Alicia's party. Since she is the creator now, she could have new abilities to showcase this. If she was introduced earlier in the game, the interaction between her and her own world's Freya could interact with Freya from Alicia's time, after Odin gets snatched by Lezard. On the topic of Lezard stealing Odin's soul, it's not convincing at all. Like, I don't think Odin would be so weak that he couldn't sense Lezard at all. It's by far the most ridiculous thing in the game. The developers should have made a playable intro where she recruits Dylan, defies Odin's orders because of something she disagrees with.
Your job is to take my order, put a smile on your face, and serve me. Oh, hell no!
Explores a level like Brahms' castle, chats with Brahms and become allies, and Silmeria gradually understands humans, kinda like Christ with Alicia. After that, they explore the way she hid Brahms inside her soul and how Dylan and Brahms became one person, and the most critical of all, how she influenced Alicia's childhood, where you control Alicia as a child and having Silmeria explain things to her and explore the castle along with little Alicia, and becoming banished from the kingdom for years and wakes up in the castle she gets imprisoned in the intro of Valkyrie Profile 2. The game is a mix of side-scrolling and turn-based action gameplay elements. It's a lot like the previous game but more evolved and in a 3D view. It has light puzzles.
Oh my god, what is that? Ooh.
Let's go.
Except for that damn Palace of the Venerated Dragon puzzle.
What does that mean?
Ain't nobody got time for that.
I got hemorrhoids because I didn't want to go away until I finished that level. It has some really interesting level design. but just like its predecessor, the game doesn't outright tell you what to do in certain levels. Seriously, I am not a poet, and if I were, I still wouldn't understand this shit, and that's about the only critique I have aside from its insane grinding requirements. The game is very straightforward. You go to towns, and interact with objects and the people in towns to unlock areas that progress the story or side dungeons. It's a simple rinse and repeat process that you learn on your own. The towns also contain places where you can brush up on your knowledge of certain gameplay elements, and the town's population does update their dialogue depending on what chapter you're in. The towns contain shops and merchants to make your purchases at or create new equipment if you have the materials necessary. When going into an enemy territory, you can either confront them head-on by attacking/touching them. By attacking them successfully, you gain an advantage of having your ATB gauge filled, or in the latter's case, you have a chance of being disadvantaged by having your ATB gauge be completely drained at the start of the battle. You can also leverage enemies as platforms to progress throughout the environment by using photons to stun them temporarily, and can be moved to different places, and you can switch places with them if you shoot them with another photon. The enemies come in all shapes and sizes, and I do mean all sizes.
Be nothing left of you when I'm through!
The areas can have their own special quirks too. In some areas, you can't use your photon powers, or the area can be affected by something called a stone dios. It's a clever new mechanic that can affect you or the enemies in positive and/or negative ways. The dios has to have an orb to affect the enemies in an area. The other method is to carry the orb with you, and it'll only affect you. You can transplant the orbs you carry around on a stone dios to transfer these effects onto the enemies in an area. I do recommend you use these to help you, as it does lower the grinding required to progress. This game, along with Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne, is the Dark Souls of JRPGs before Dark Souls was a thing. It's not that everything is difficult, but some bosses and enemies can be a colossal challenge. Throughout the environment, you'll find these weapons you can interact with. These will summon Einherjar. These are recruitable allies of Silmeria. You can assign them to your party or release them from your party. This is an irreversible choice. When they are gone, you can't get them back. They offer items or other information if you can find them in certain locations. In battles, the simplest way to describe the combat system is Valkyrie Profile Lenith's combat system, but you can move around, and it has the ATB gauge from Final Fantasy XIII, plus some new additions I'll get into later. In combat, the main objective is to defeat the leader of the enemies. You don't have to defeat every enemy, but it does help because they can gang up on you if you are in a bad position for all of them to attack you. You have a 3D environment to traverse in. There can be several enemies present that move when you move your party around. They have these red outlines on the ground. These are their attack zones. If you enter these zones, the enemy will attack you, and it will have a cooldown period before it reactivates again. You also have an attack zone, which is a gold circle and not the red zone the enemies have. In the select menu, you can access your items and use any magic spells from your party members. You can only use an item or magic spell at a time before it goes into its cooldown period. You need to move around before the choice to use another item or magic spell gets refreshed. If you want to initiate a battle with enemies in the area,
Why are you running? Why are you running?
You have to get close enough with your designated leader to an enemy. You'll be able to trigger the battle sequence with that enemy. You need to press the attack buttons that are assigned to party members to create a string of combos that drains the ATB gauge with each attack from a member. The more you attack, the further your soul crush gauge will increase up to a maximum of 100%. If you reach this threshold, you'll be able to unleash devastating special attacks depending on the weapons you equipped on your party members.
Prepare to be purified! Divine Assault!
The enemies consist of multiple body parts that can be exploited if you target them. I love that you can equip body parts of destroyed enemies as accessories.
These gorgeous stars came with the trees. I love them.
I do too.
Give.
Oh.
They can be broken down to give materials or items, or it can trigger a new mechanic where you can use unlimited amounts of attack in a short window of time. You'll know when it happens because it flashes in front of you. If it's triggered successfully, you'll feel like a badass. It fills you with adrenaline to punish the enemy into pieces, literally. The environment can also be your enemy or friend. Some are set with traps or boons. Be very wary. The enemies and party members have special affinities and disadvantages against certain elements and ailments, so be cautious with your party members and try to exploit the weaknesses of your enemies. Regarding party members, you can equip them with various equipment you can match up to unlock new skills to use in combat. You can select what attack your members should use and in what order too. All these features make up for complex and in-depth customization for its combat system. A lot of party members do come and go, so choose your party members carefully, because this can screw you over in future chapters where the enemies get tougher over time. I recommend you use Einherjar from the beginning you get them. The other big omission of this game is Silmeria in gameplay. Yes, she has ample on-screen time in Alicia's body in cutscenes, but she makes no physical appearance in battle. She does give hints in battle, but I feel she needs a gimmick of her own to make her affect combat in some way. She could introduce a mechanic who takes over Alicia's body when Alicia takes too much damage and provide unique buffs and abilities. This is a double-edged sword because this can raise the rate at which warriors from Valhalla appear in the environment or combat. While not taking over Alicia's body in battles, she could be somewhere in the battle zones, attacking enemies with her bow from a safe distance, but she can only move on certain platforms and can only attack if the enemies are inside her radius to attack them, and she can't participate with the rest of her party members to chain combos. If she uses her sword in combat, she will be able to attack on her own or with the party to link combos. The downside of this is she is more vulnerable to getting damaged and being captured by Valhalla's force if they get too close to her. Choosing which weapons she uses is a 50-50th chance that you have no control over, and she has 2 equipment menus for both her playstyles. Is it worth the experience? Yes, absolutely. It is a lot easier than its predecessor because you don't really need a guide to complete the story, but some of the bosses can be a real pain in the ass sometimes. While it does have a massive difficulty curve that requires a lot of grinding, it's an incredibly rewarding adventure. I put this game at the same level as God of War 2 on the PS2. It has amazing graphics and is one of the few PS2 video games that can output 720i resolution on native hardware. The story is masterful yet flawed at the same time because of the plot holes that the time machine brings to the story. The gameplay loop is incredibly satisfying, simple, and infinitely repeatedly enjoyable, and while I'm not fond that the Einherjar isn't as important as in the previous entry, they are still an interesting way to get sidetracked from the main story and get more invested into the characters you play as, because some do complement the main story and the background of the overworld and setting. One of the few recommendations I have for newcomers is to play the game with cheat codes, because the grinding can be a lot, or to use a save file from game FAQs if you just want to enjoy the story and setting. How does it fare against other JRPG games? It's amazing and unique because it tackled taboo themes at the time of its release. It's a lot more traditional than the previous entry, but it executes it so smoothly that it genuinely contends with other giant JRPG franchises such as Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest. I'm genuinely shocked that the game and the franchise as a whole don't get talked about when the topic of PS2 JRPGs gets brought up. Did it stand the test of time? Yes, if you can get your hands on it. The game isn't in any official digital format, you can only hope to get this game through resellers or the internet. You can play the game through a PS2 emulator, but there are a lot of oddities such as weird blurred backgrounds and rainbow edges, but that's more on the part of the emulator rather than the game itself. The game does require a curious and intuitive mind, or someone that likes to read guides on what to do at times in terms of gameplay and troubleshooting problems in PCSX2. Me and another fan from Discord, Celestial, worked together on a project where the textures of the game got updated with 4K resolution textures. It does help the game a lot, especially the low resolution background textures. I'll put a link to it in my description box. If you can run the 4K textures alongside running it at 1440p or above, it looks so crisp and clean that you can mistake this game for a PS3 game at times. The majority of reviews at the time of its release have garnered favorable reviews from both fans and critics alike, and these opinions have been preserved over the years throughout its fan base. I joke with other fans that we're like cremated bodies turning in our graves at the slightest hint of a Valkyrie profile game because we are starved for content regarding this series. I replayed Valkyrie Profile 2 the most, and that's how this video began actually. Revisiting the second entry is arguably the best one for a myriad of reasons. I hope you enjoyed his video. Okay. This video took me a very long time to complete because changed my direction of how I wanted to present this review/retrospective on the game. I did so after getting suggestions from the Valkyrie Profile Discord users. I typically tease upcoming videos by giving sneak peeks of my thumbnails and scripts a lot earlier than my YouTube video releases. I treat this as a perk for anyone that is on the server, so come and join us. I wanted to give a shout out to another amazing YouTuber, Lux Umbra. He makes very good content about JRPGs and video games in general, so check him out. Also, I want to give my thanks to the Valkyrie Profile Reddit page. I got a lot of information about Valkyrie Profile 2 through their links page. It's very difficult to get Valkyrie Profile 2 articles on the internet because the game has faded into obscurity over the years. Here's a teaser of what I have planned for my next video. And yes, I am still planning of doing the Valkyrie Profile Lenneth mobile port review.